My name is Eli Torres, and 6 months ago, I learned what betrayal really feels like. I was living in Barcelona, teaching English and finishing my remote master's in cultural studies. It had been a good year, a peaceful one. I had just paid the property tax on my house back in Arizona, and was finally feeling like I was getting ahead financially. That house meant everything to me. It was where I grew up, where my dad and I used to sit on the porch watching monsoons roll in. Where he died, too young, but with one clear instruction in his will. The house goes to Eli. No one else. So imagine my shock when I got a WhatsApp message from my old neighbor, Mr. Lenz. It was a photo. A moving truck in my driveway. The caption, "Didn't know you were selling, new owners moving in." I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the wrong address. Maybe someone just renting it temporarily. I called my cousin Javier. No answer. Called again. Texted my Aunt Sylvia. She'd been living nearby, supposedly checking on the house while I was abroad. Silence. Then came the email. "Mr. Torres, this is to confirm the completed sale of 178 Oak Ridge Drive. The remainder of the funds will be wired once closing fees are deducted." I stared at the screen like I'd been punched. I hadn't signed a single document. I hadn't even talked to a realtor. Turns out, they didn't need me. Or so they thought. They dug up a decade-old medical power of attorney I'd signed before a surgery and used it to forge documents. They cleaned out the house, sold it, took the profit, all while smiling at me over holiday video calls. They thought being 5,000 miles away made me powerless. They were about to learn that I don't go quiet, especially when someone takes what my father left for me. They stole my house. I was going to take everything they cared about. I grew up on Oak Ridge Drive in a modest one-story brick house with a cracked driveway and a mango tree in the backyard that never quite bore fruit. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. My dad, Miguel Torres, was a postal worker who believed in two things: saving what little you had and protecting your family, even when they didn't deserve it. My mom passed away when I was 10. After that, it was just the two of us. We had a quiet rhythm. Pancakes on Sundays, gardening on Saturdays, and silence in between. He wasn't the kind of father who said, "I love you" often, but he showed it. By showing up. By working double shifts. By opening a savings account in my name when I was 13 and calling it the Future Fund. I didn't realize until much later just how much he had sacrificed to keep that house and keep me afloat. My cousin Javier and Aunt Sylvia were frequent visitors, always smiling, always offering unsolicited advice. They lived about 15 minutes away, in a duplex that always seemed to need repairs. My dad helped them often, loaned tools, sometimes loaned money, but he never spoke ill of them. "Family helps," he used to say, even if they wouldn't do the same. When my dad got sick, they showed up more often. Sylvia brought casseroles. Javier mowed the lawn a few times. I didn't question it. I was 20 then, working part-time and trying to keep up with school. Dad never asked me to drop anything, just to be there. And I was. When he passed, I was devastated. But there was also relief. He had made it clear what he wanted. His will, written and notarized 2 years before, left the house to me. No caveats, no splits. It was mine, and it felt like the only piece of him I had left. But grief doesn't stop bills. I stayed in the house for a while, but eventually, an opportunity came up. A teaching position in Spain with tuition assistance for a master's program. I talked it over with Sylvia and Javier, who both said, "You've got to live your life. Don't let the house hold you back." I didn't want to rent it out to strangers, so I left it vacant but cared for. I paid a neighborhood teen to mow the lawn. I left spare keys with Sylvia, just in case. I set up auto pay for the utilities. Everything was in order, or so I thought. Every time I video called them, they said everything was fine. Just dusty, Sylvia would say. But we're keeping an eye on it. Looking back, there were signs. The mortgage mail stopped coming. A few emails from the county assessor's office were flagged as spam. But I was overseas, buried in work, speaking more Spanish than English most days. It was easy to dismiss. Until the photo. Until the truck. Until the house, my house, was gone. I called the county recorder's office. They confirmed a sale had taken place 6 weeks earlier. The buyer, a young couple from Tucson, paid in full. I asked how it was legally done. I never signed anything. They sent me a scanned power of attorney document. It was my name, my signature. But it was a copy of an old form I had signed before minor surgery at 19, giving Sylvia temporary medical authority. The notarized date had been altered. Pages had been added. The ink looked digitally inserted. It was a forgery, a stupid, obvious one, but enough to fool a system that never actually called to confirm. I reached out to Sylvia. No answer. I texted Javier. You sold my house. You stole from me. His reply, you weren't even using it. It was just sitting there. We needed it more. And just like that, the years of we're family fell apart. They hadn't just crossed a line, they'd lit the bridge on fire. And now I had to decide what kind of legacy I was going to honor. The quiet sacrifice my father taught me, or the fight he never had the chance to finish. The first thing I did was book a flight home. I didn't have a plan, just fury. By the time I landed back in Arizona, the house was no longer mine, legally speaking. The sale had been finalized. The new owners were already living there, posting photos on social media of their first home, with fresh paint and a welcome home doormat. It made me physically sick. I parked across the street that first night, just sitting in my rental car, watching the lights flicker on inside a place that used to be mine. I could still picture my dad's recliner in the corner, the faint mark on the wall where I'd measured my height growing up. It was all gone. Javier had the nerve to post about taking care of family on Facebook the next day. I stayed with a friend while I tried to figure out my options. I went to the police. They told me it was a civil matter. I met with a lawyer, and while she was sympathetic, the news wasn't great. Forged documents are serious, she said. But if the sale was processed and the buyers were unaware, it's very hard to undo. I could sue, but even if I won, I wouldn't get the house back. I'd get a payout, maybe, and legal fees would eat half of it. Worse, if I went public, my own reputation could take a hit. Javier and Sylvia had already started spinning the narrative. I got texts from mutual relatives. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Eli, don't burn bridges over something your aunt says was temporary. Temporary. They emptied the house. They scrubbed it clean. They erased my life like it was a storage unit they'd inherited by accident. I started pulling records, mortgage statements, emails, old messages from Sylvia where she talked about just holding the keys. I contacted the notary listed on the altered POA form. She swore she hadn't signed anything like that in years. Bit by bit, I was collecting evidence, but the more I dug, the more I realized. This wasn't just about the house. It was about erasure, about the way my family had always viewed me as the outsider, the academic, the quiet one, the one who left. Sylvia used to joke that I was too good for Arizona. Javier once told me I talked like a professor even when I was asking for salt. At the time, I thought it was teasing. Now I saw it for what it was. Resentment. They didn't just sell my house. They resented that I had one to begin with. And now that I had returned, they expected me to walk away quietly. Maybe send an angry email. Maybe post a sad status. But nothing more. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to try to undo what they did. I was going to expose them. Fully. Legally. Publicly. Not just for me, but for every person who's ever been stabbed in the back by someone who smiled while doing it. I didn't want a shouting match. I didn't want to throw bricks through windows or send angry group texts. That's the kind of chaos Sylvia and Javier thrived in. I wanted something they wouldn't see coming. First, I focused on the paper trail. I dug through every shred of documentation I had. Emails, bank transfers, digital signatures. I filed a report with the county recorder's fraud unit, attaching evidence that the power of attorney had been forged and notarized using a false date and an altered document. I followed up with a formal complaint to the Arizona Attorney General's office, citing elder fraud and identity manipulation. Then I turned to the State Notary Public Commission. When I contacted the notary listed on the forged form, she was furious. Her signature had been copied and pasted from a different document. She wrote a sworn affidavit for me and submitted it directly to the fraud office. That alone flagged Sylvia and Javier for criminal review. But that was just the beginning. My next move? A quiet little website, oakridgeheist.com. I kept it minimal. Black background, white text, just the facts, a timeline of the sale, screenshots of forged documents, a statement from the notary, my side of the story, told plainly, without emotion. I didn't post it under my name, but I linked it to a Reddit thread in a real estate community, then a Facebook group for inheritance abuse, then Twitter. Within 2 days, the site had 11,000 views. I wasn't interested in going viral. I was interested in reputation collapse. Sylvia ran a local business helping seniors with estate planning. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Javier? He was trying to get approved for a mortgage through a federal first-time homebuyer program. I sent an anonymous tip to his mortgage officer, attaching proof of his forged real estate transaction and the open investigation. Then I got even more strategic. I scheduled a free legal consultation with a civil litigation firm that specialized in constructive fraud and undue influence in property transfers. They confirmed what I suspected. While I couldn't get the house back from the new owners, I could sue Sylvia and Javier for the full value of the property and punitive damages. I filed the suit. They were served 2 days later, during a Sunday lunch at Sylvia's favorite diner. And the moment the paperwork hit their table, everything changed. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't heard from in years were calling me to say, "I didn't know what they were doing, Eli." If I had known. I didn't respond. They weren't my target. The court of law would handle one side. But the court of public opinion? That was mine. I gave interviews. Carefully. Anonymously at first. Then later, under my name, when a local investigative podcast picked up the story. They titled the episode, "Heir to Nothing, When Your Family Sells You Out for Profit." Sylvia's business started losing clients. Javier's loan was frozen. Their faces didn't go viral, but they became known in the community. Whispered about, side-eyed, questioned. I didn't scream. I didn't even have to raise my voice. I just made sure that from now on, whenever someone Googled their names, the truth showed up first. The court hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in late September. The air outside the courthouse was still hot, but the inside was ice cold. All tile floors, buzzing fluorescent lights, and that tense quiet that feels like something's about to snap. I sat across from Sylvia and Javier for the first time since I got back to Arizona. They looked smaller than I remembered. Javier was slouched in his seat, chewing the inside of his cheek, while Sylvia had on her usual fake composure. The same look she used to wear when she'd tell neighbors we were such a close-knit family. They didn't say a word to me, just avoided eye contact like they could erase me all over again. Their lawyer opened with an apology-slick explanation. He claimed they had acted under the impression that the power of attorney was still valid, that the sale was in the family's best interest, and that the money had been held in good faith for me if I had wanted it. Held in good faith? They spent it. I knew it. The judge listened politely, nodded once, then turned to my lawyer. She was calm, precise, ruthless in the way a good attorney should be. She laid everything out. The forged notary stamp, the altered documents, the timeline showing how Sylvia and Javier accessed the property records using my old login info, how they removed all contents of the home just days before the sale. Then she showed a side-by-side of my real signature next to the one on the forged POA. Even the judge squinted at the screen. "You're telling me this passed for authorization?" Sylvia shifted uncomfortably. Javier didn't say a word. My lawyer ended with this. "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's calculated fraud. They didn't just sell a house. They took an inheritance, violated a will, and permanently displaced my client from the only family property left to him." For a few moments, the courtroom was completely still. Then the judge said, "We'll proceed to trial if a settlement isn't reached. But I can already tell you, the burden of proof is not on the plaintiff anymore." That was it. Their faces cracked. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. But I looked Sylvia in the eye for the first time and said quietly, "My dad trusted you. That house was his entire life, and you sold it for a temporary payday." She looked away. That was all I needed. Not vengeance. Not even the money. Just truth, said out loud, in a place where it counted. A month after the hearing, I received the settlement offer. $237,000, the full market value of the house at time of sale, plus $25,000 in punitive damages, as recommended by the mediator. They didn't even fight it. Javier and Sylvia didn't want a public trial, not after everything that had already come out. Not with their names already circulating in community Facebook groups, local business pages, and that podcast episode that refused to die. They agreed to the payout on the condition that I remove the website and issue no further public statements. I declined the condition. Instead, I had my lawyer include a clause. The site stays up until every cent is paid. And until then, I reserve the right to speak about it freely. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about boundaries, accountability, and not letting people like them rewrite the story to suit their shame. The payout came in staggered installments. I used the first to pay off my student loans. The second helped me move into a new apartment in a quieter part of town, not too far from where I grew up, but just far enough that I didn't have to run into old ghosts at the grocery store. Every time a deposit hit my account, I labeled it in my budget spreadsheet. Stolen. Returned. I heard from a few extended relatives. Some apologized. Some just wanted to gossip. I stopped answering most of them. The ones who mattered had already shown their loyalty, or lack of it, when it counted. Sylvia's estate business quietly shut down. No public statement, no farewell post. Just gone. Javier tried to launch a GoFundMe to rebuild after legal hardship. It didn't last a week. The top comment read, "Maybe don't steal houses next time." I didn't donate. Didn't even share it. I didn't need to. The internet has a memory longer than their apologies. As for the new owners of my childhood home, I met them. Once. I knocked on their door one weekend, introduced myself, and explained briefly what had happened. They were kind, sympathetic. The wife said, "We'd heard rumors, but I'm so sorry. If it means anything, we love the place. We're taking care of it." It did mean something, because while they lived there now, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. My father's gift hadn't been the house. It had been the fight, the knowledge that I could stand up when no one else thought I would, that I could be thousands of miles away and still make myself heard. I didn't get the house back, but I got something better. I got myself back. Closure didn't come in one moment. It came in slow, quiet waves, like when I passed Oak Ridge Drive months later without flinching, or when I saw an old photo of my dad on the porch and didn't feel hollow, just thankful that he once stood beside me in that space. It came the first time I told someone new what happened and didn't feel like I had to defend my choices, or when I heard Sylvia's name mentioned at a neighborhood BBQ and didn't feel the urge to correct every rumor, because I knew the truth already lived out in the open. That truth was no longer mine to protect or hide. It had weight. It had shape. It had been said out loud. And that, I learned, was the beginning of healing. I used part of the settlement money to start a small side project, nothing big. Just a blog for people navigating inheritance fraud and betrayal. I didn't advertise it, but slowly, stories started coming in. A woman whose brother sold their grandmother's land while she was in hospice. A man whose cousin forged their uncle's will. All of them carrying the same ache. The ache of being erased by someone who once sat beside you at the holiday table. I started replying to each message. Not with legal advice, I'm not a lawyer, but with the only thing I could offer. I believe you. And you're not crazy for feeling like this destroyed more than just property. Because it does. It cuts through memory, through legacy, through the fragile thread that ties families together and says, this is safe, this is home. But here's what I know now. You can rebuild. Not the house, not always the money, but yourself, your sense of worth, your understanding of what you deserve. Your right to say, that was wrong, even when no one else wants to admit it. The last time I visited my dad's grave, I brought him a single key. The old front door key from the Oak Ridge house. I left it on the headstone, tucked beneath a flat stone to keep it from blowing away. I kept the promise, Dad, I said. Not the one about the house. The one about never letting anyone take what matters without a fight. Then I walked away. And I didn't look back. Because closure isn't forgetting. It's remembering. Without pain. And knowing that even if they sold the house behind your back, they never took your future. They just reminded you how hard you're willing to fight to protect it.